Brilliance Audio presents Back Bay by William Martin, performed by John Pruden. October 1789. Horace Taylor Pratt pulled a silver snuff box from his waistcoat pocket and placed it on the table in front of him. He hated snuff boxes. They were small, delicate, and nearly impossible for a man with one arm to open. Whenever he fumbled for snuff, Pratt cursed the two-armed world that conspired against him. But when he wanted a clear head, he had to have snuff. This evening, he wanted wits as sharp as a glass cutter. He slid the box open, took a pinch of black powder, and brought it to his nose. "Father!" the young voice cracked, and Pratt turned to his son, a handsome boy of 13. "You're not going to sneeze in the presence of His Majesty, are you, Father?" Pratt looked around, his fingers poised theatrically just below his left nostril. "Majesty? I see no king, Horace." 200 of Boston's most prominent citizens sat with the Pratts at a great three-sided banquet table in Faneuil Hall. The gentlemen were dressed in their finest satins, brocades, broadcloths, and silks. The table was covered in Irish linen and laden with fruits and cheeses. Candles glowed against October's early dusk. John Hancock's personal stock of port filled crystal stemware. The guest of honor seated between John Adams and Governor Hancock was America's most royal figure. "I mean his presidency." Young Horace looked toward the middle of the table, where a hulking man with powdered hair chewed on a piece of cheddar while Hancock and Adams conversed around him. "You can't take snuff in front of George Washington." Pratt leaned close to his son and whispered, "He looks rather bored sitting between those two Massachusetts magpies. I dare say he'd love a dash of snuff himself right now." Pratt inhaled the tobacco and took another pinch in his right nostril. He closed his eyes. He felt the tingle spread through his sinuses. His mouth opened, his back stiffened, and he reached for his handkerchief. Before he could cover his face, the sneeze burst out of him, and Washington jumped as though startled by a British musket. Pratt sneezed again, more violently. Conversation stopped all about the room. John Adams shot an angry glance at Pratt. Young Horace slumped in his chair and counted the stitches on the hem of the tablecloth. Pratt sneezed once more, a final satisfied bark. Then he blew his nose and looked around. Every eye was upon him. When Horace Taylor Pratt wanted attention, no discreet clearing of the throat or subtle shuffling of the feet would do. He glanced toward the center of the table. Washington was still staring in his direction, and John Adams's bald head was blushing crimson, the color of Washington's satin frock. Pratt stood quickly. "Before John Adams, in the high dudgeon for which he is famous, chides me for taking a bit of snuff, let me propose a toast." He lifted his glass. "To the health of our Federal Republic and its new president." "Hear, hear," grunted Mather Byles, the old Tory minister seated next to Pratt. John Hancock raised his glass. John Adams lifted his crankily, and the gentlemen of Boston toasted the president. Then Washington stood slowly and raised his glass to Pratt. "To you, Mr. Pratt, Horace Taylor Pratt. To you, Mr. Pratt, and to all your peers in Boston. We certainly hope that your snuff comes from fine Virginia tobacco." Washington smiled, and everyone else laughed politely. Pratt introduced himself to the president. When he spoke out later, Washington would know him. He finished his wine and sat down as conversation began again in the banquet hall. "I must offer Mr. Washington some of my English snuff after the ceremony," whispered Pratt to his son. "English snuff?" Mather Byles leaned into the conversation. "Your father may have bad manners, Horace, but he has excellent taste in snuff. The English know how to make it," explained Pratt, "along with most other things." "You have such admiration for British craftsmanship," said Byles. "I sometimes wonder that you weren't a Tory." "Reverend, 14 years ago the British crown stood between me and a fortune. Had men like me remained loyal, the British would still be here and I'd still be poor. You'd still have your left arm. A small price to pay." Pratt smiled, but he showed no pleasure. His deep-set eyes and prominent nose gave him the look of a predator, a man who never rested. Although he was only 39, his gaunt frame had already begun to bow, and his hair showed considerably more gray than black. Byles looked at the empty sleeve. "You never know when you might need 2 arms, Horace. My son is my left arm, Reverend, stronger and more reliable than my own limb." Pratt wrapped his right arm around the boy's shoulders. Byles looked at young Horace. "Does the boy enjoy being one of his father's extremities?" Horace didn't notice the sarcasm. "I'm a Pratt, Reverend. One day I'll take my place at the head of Pratt Shipping and Mercantile. It is in my best interest to help my father in whatever way I can." "The warmest of filial sentiments," said Byles. The sound of silver tapping gently on a crystal wine-glass interrupted the conversation. John Hancock was ringing for quiet. "Watch closely," whispered Pratt to his son. "Your lesson for today is about to begin.